was weird, right? Like, this was a very weird game that was played in week 8. Maybe it's because of the weather. Maybe it's because of the Browns injury situation. Maybe it's because it's the Raiders, and whenever the Browns and Raiders meet up, it's always weird. It was weird the last time the Browns played the Raiders, but this was weird. I don't know how bad it was because Oakland is a decent team. They're a team that beat Kansas City. They're a team that beat New Orleans. They're a good team, but there are some things about this loss that are very concerning for the Cleveland Browns. So what are those things? Well, let's talk about it. Real quick before we get started here, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell. We are so close to 20,000 subscribers. It would be an amazing thing to hit that before the end of this month. So if you can, please hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. But also, I have to show love to the Patreon members and give them the dog checks. The dog checks are for anybody who joins Patreon and joins the dog check tier on Patreon. And those dog checks are going to go to Greg Ehlers, Seth Harrison, Dan in West Texas, Billy, Jaret Austin, Robert Gentry, Patrick F. Austin, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, ITRex, Jesus Serrano, the Picktown Browns backers, and Max Owl Dojo. I want to thank you guys for supporting me. Patreon has been a lifesaver for this channel as of late. So again, thank you guys so much. You're helping keep this channel alive. You're helping keep this thing alive. And I could not thank you enough. Thank you guys. And oh yeah, let me not forget, dog check. It's a sad dog check. The Browns lost. But the story of this game is exactly what the story was that carried over from last week. And that story is something that carried over from last year, which is outside of Myles Garrett, this defensive line is simply not good enough and not deep enough and not strong enough in the middle to do anything substantial outside of Myles Garrett. It's a serious problem. 6 possessions is all the possessions that the Cleveland Browns offense got this game. That's abysmal. That is a sign of your defense not being able to get off the field and giving up a ton of points, even though they didn't give up a ton of points. There's a lot of long drives. But it's also a sign of a defense that can't stop the run. And again, I said this at the beginning of the season. It looked like they were on the right track. Larry Ogunjobi was playing real well for a couple of weeks. Then he got hurt. He's come back, and he's been the same old Larry Ogunjobi that he's always been, which is somebody who can rush the passer quite well, but cannot for the life of him stop the run. And that's what they were doing. They were running inside all day, and they had it all day with ease. How many easy 5-7 yard runs on first and second down that the Raiders have because the Browns were incapable of stopping the run on the inside? At that point, when you're getting gashed at that level, that's not on your linebackers completely. That's on your interior defensive linemen to do something. You watch the Pittsburgh Steelers. You watch the Baltimore Ravens. They don't get gashed up the middle because their interior defensive linemen are always there making plays, even the Indianapolis Colts. These are teams the Browns have all played. We've seen this go down. The interior defensive line is massively important to a team's ability to stop the interior run. And in a game like this, where stopping that inside run would be pivotal, they could not do it, especially since the Browns were worried about Henry Ruggs. They did not stack the box a ton, which meant that it was up to the defensive line to win those battles. And when Myles Garrett's out there commanding 3 heads, it's still on these guys one-on-one to win these battles, and they just couldn't. And that's where you have to start to ask yourself some serious questions about this Browns defense. Why is it that Myles Garrett can consistently maintain getting double teamed and still being productive while everybody else can be singled up and not be productive? Why is that the case when this defensive line is not cheap when it comes to assets that you spun on these guys and money? They're the most underperforming unit on this team. We could talk about how bad the safeties are. You didn't pay a ton of money for the safeties, but when you look at this defensive line, long-term commitments were made. Olivier Vernon, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi was a 3rd-round draft pick. Like, these are guys who are supposed to pan out long-term for your team that just aren't producing at a high enough level. And at this point, I'm kind of irritated because I'm asking, why didn't they do anything about this in the offseason? They knew Andrew Billups was going to be opting out at the beginning of training camp. They had opportunities to bring in guys like Mike Daniels. They had opportunities to bring in guys like Jonathan Hankins. They had all these opportunities to bring in guys who would fit this role. They decided not to, and now they're getting ripped up on the inside. And the real question is going to be what you're going to do now. All those options are off the table. Those guys are on teams. So what are you going to do now? This team can be flawed, but they cannot be that bad against the run. This defense has to get to a middling level for the Browns to have any real chance of trying to do anything in the playoffs. This is a serious problem for the Browns. They cannot skid along here with the 30th ranked defense because this offense is not that good. I know people are going to say Kansas City did not have a great defense, but they also had Patrick Mahomes and Kareem Hunt all in the same offense. Baker Mayfield's not Patrick Mahomes at this point. So you don't have an offense that's that explosive that can make up for any mishaps in this defense. You need a defense that's going to be able to at least hold their own. And today, they did not hold their own. They got absolutely dragged up and down the field, and they got dominated. And that's not on the secondary this week. That's not on the safeties this week. It's all on the front three outside of Myles Garrett, right? Because Myles is playing hurt. He got hurt in this game, and he still did more than any of those guys. Maybe Olivier Vernon. He had 2 sacks today. Let me not be too mean to him. But nobody else produced, especially when it came to stopping the run. Even when Olivier Vernon got 2 sacks in that one drive, he still could not stop the inside run. They still could not tackle worth anything, gave up 15 yards to give up a first down. The defense does not have to be great or amazing, but they got to be a lot better than this. This is bad. They can't be this. And it shows itself every time this team is forced to have to perform without Myles Garrett. I talked about it last week. I talked about it in my trade deadline video on why the Browns need to get Myles Garrett some help there. Look, I understand you're not going to find a co-star for Myles Garrett at this point in the season. Unique Ngakoue just got traded, so you're not going to find a legitimate co-star for him, but you could find him some bench help, right? He needs help at the bench level. Because Porter Gustin, while he's useful on rundowns, is not useful on pass rushing situations. He just doesn't get the same push there. Adrian Claiborne has not been it. Olivier Vernon was okay today, but he's not been it for the whole season. And then when you talk about the issues when it comes to stopping the run, you just don't have enough beef in the interior. This has been a problem the entire year. And now you're at a point to where if Myles Garrett misses any time whatsoever, that's going to be detrimental to a defense that's quite frankly hanging on by shoestrings at this point. And my thing is, look, we knew this defense wasn't going to be great coming into the season. We knew this wasn't going to be a top 5 or top 10 defense. We were under no illusion that that would be the case. But there is a level of realistic expectations that Browns fans should have had about this defense. And the realistic expectation is this defense should not be this bad. I know the personnel is not great on this defense. I know there are some flaws and some holes on this defense. I am not blind to that. I talked about it nonstop during the offseason. But the fact is, you have Denzel Ward, who's playing at a top 10 corner level. You have Myles Garrett, who's playing at a defensive player of the year level. You should not be this bad on defense. Stop right there. That's the truth. Like, that's it for this defense. You should not be this bad on a defense that has Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. What does that mean? That means the onus is on Andrew Berry and Joe Woods to fix this because he's going to have to make some moves. These aren't going to be big, sexy moves, I think, but these are going to be moves that are a little bit smaller, a little bit more tinkery, much like a lot of the offseason moves that they made this year. But you need to make some of these moves because Joe Woods needs to find a way to have enough flexibility with this defense to put guys in better situations. That means having Andrew Sadeo not have to cover a ton of ground. That means not asking Larry Ogunjobi to be your best interior run stuffer when that's not something he's done well or has a history of doing well. Same thing with Sheldon Richardson, right? You got 2 pass rushing interior defensive tackles in there. Of course, they're not going to be great at stopping the run. Maybe you need to get a run stuffer in there. Maybe you need to put Myles Garrett inside on crucial downs. You need to do something that ain't happening because this defensive line has not stopped the run since about week 3. Whether that's trading for J.J. Watt, which would be a big deal, or Quinnen Williams, or it's something smaller along the lines of the things I outlined in a trade deadline video I did earlier last week. Something needs to happen. The defensive line cannot go on as is and think that everything's just going to be okay. I don't think the free agency market for next year is going to solve the problem. I don't think the draft is going to solve the problem. This is something you need to fix now because you might as well. There's some decent options out there. You might as well do it now. And again, I get it. To the people who are saying I'm making too much of a big deal about this defense being bad when we knew it was going to be bad, I get it. I talked all offseason about the holes at safety. I talked all offseason about the holes at linebacker. I get it. Andrew Sadejo is not good. But Andrew Sadejo should not be bringing down your entire defense. The reality is a lot of teams in the NFL have a player that's as bad as Andrew Sadejo starting for them. That's just the nature of how defenses work. The good defenses find a way to make that guy do as little as possible so you can hide them. So having Andrew Sadejo start for you, it's not great, but it's not something that should tank your defense. It's not a good enough excuse for Joe Woods. So I get that the personnel might not be ideal, but the personnel is not abysmal. It's not 30th in the NFL. You know, Larry Ogunjobi's supposed to be decent. Sheldon Richardson's supposed to be decent. Olivier Vernon's supposed to be decent. You have Myles Garrett. You have Denzel Ward. Terrence Mitchell hasn't been terrible on the other side. So I don't think there's really good excuses for this defense. They've been bad, and either it's players not executing or the coaching staff not putting these guys in the right position. Either way, something needs to happen during the bye week. Some adjustments need to be made to make this defense livable, because right now it's not livable. And if it's not livable against the Raiders, it's definitely not going to be livable against the Titans, against the Steelers, against the Ravens, and so on and so forth. So it needs to get to a livable level, and I hope to see adjustments that will trend this defense in that direction during the bye week. All right, so let's talk about the offense. I felt like the offense, in the small amount of time they had the ball, I felt like the one thing that was decent about it was I felt Baker had a decent game here. Now, it's not going to show up in the stat sheets because he had a ton of drops. It was like 40-degree winds, slush and snow all over the place. It was not a great setting to be a quarterback, but also Derek Carr played in those same settings. But I did like what I saw out of Baker, at least on first review. I felt like he stayed poised. I felt like he really stuck in that pocket as long as you wanted him to. I felt like he made some plays early on in the pocket. It's just his wide receivers were dropping the ball like crazy. David Njoku had like a drop. Jarvis had a couple of drops. I think he had like 3 drops. He has a lot of them this season. I know he's injured. At this point, he probably needs to miss some games so he can get back healthy. But the situation with the Browns wide receivers, I don't know if you can spare to have him miss a couple of games. So I don't know what that situation is going to look like. I hope he can recover during the bye week. But he's clearly not been the same juice that we're accustomed to him being. But I felt like he climbed the pocket well. I felt like he really did a good job of maneuvering in the pocket and trying to make things happen from the pocket. I was really happy with what I saw out of Baker Mayfield. I just wasn't happy with what I saw out of his receivers, which is something I haven't said all season. I felt like he did everything on that last drive to give these guys opportunities to make plays, and just nobody could come up and do what they've done for the early part of the season, which is step up and make these incredible plays. It just wasn't there. So I'm not upset with Baker this week. I think Baker was all right, passable, fine. I think he did some good things, but I do have some grievances with a handful of people on this offense. First of which being Jedrick Wills. Very sloppy game. Very rookie-ish game for Jedrick Wills. Had a lot of penalties, blew a couple of blocks, just did not play great. Still struggling in the run game a little bit. He needs to get all those things tightened up. But he's probably the least guilty out of everybody, to be honest, even though he did hurt the Browns with some of those false starts and put them in terrible field position, which led to a missed field goal. So he's definitely responsible. And the reason I'm upset with these guys is we could talk as much about how bad the defense was and how they didn't show up. But the fact of the matter is the Raiders only scored 16 points. Like, that's it. They only scored 16 points. And if you watch this game, the Browns left 13 points on the board, and it was purely due to drops and bad execution. Harrison Bryant fumbles on the Raiders' 30-yard line inexplicably for no reason at all. It was like a Madden fumble. That would have been a field goal. That would have at least been 3 points, so it's 3 right there. Jarvis double catches a ball he would normally catch easily. And that's a tough catch, but we paid Jarvis to make the tough catches. He did not make the tough catch. He bobbled it and then let it fall to the ground and slide, and then it got challenged and overturned. That would have been a touchdown. That would have been 6 or 7 points. So now you're at 10 points, right? Cody Parkey missed the field goal because of the Jedrick Wills false start that pushed it back about 5 yards. And David Njoku inexplicably drops a wide open ball where he had all the space in the world to at least get to field goal range. He drops it on like a 3rd and long, and that probably cost you at least 3 points. That's 16 to 10 points that the Browns missed out on because of drops and bad execution outside of the quarterback position. And that is a swing that would have either tied the game for the Cleveland Browns or won the game for the Cleveland Browns. So again, blame the defense. The defense could have stopped them. The defense could have gotten off the field more. The defense could have gave the offense more tries. That is definitely perfectly valid, but the offense definitely did not do their job either. The receivers didn't show up. Jedrick was asleep. It was just a very, very, very sloppy, out of sync game for the offense because of the receiver play. And that's not normally been the case. Normally it's because Baker's not doing the things like sliding up in the pocket, finding his lanes, staying in there longer to find these guys. No, Baker did all that, got the ball in positions for these guys to make plays, and they just flat dropped it. Like, I don't know what else he could have done. I think Baker Mayfield might have had a career game with rushing yards this week because he had to run the ball so much because nobody was making plays from the receiving position. And Baker shouldn't have to be running the ball 3-4 times a game, but that's what happened this week. It was a complete letdown from the receiving department of this team, and they could have done much better in that area this week. This game was weird. The weather was weird. The drops were weird, and this looked like a team that, quite frankly, was limping and begging its way into the bye week. Like, it's so obvious that this team needs that bye week. They're injured. They're banged up. They need to recover. They need to also get some improvements. I think edge rush, interior defensive line, and a wide receiver deep threat are where they should focus on. I get the safety's an issue, but I think the defensive line, it's just a little bit bigger of an issue because you can get around some of your safety problems if you can make your defensive line just a little bit better. And a wide receiver deep threat, one of the things to notice in this game is that the Browns did not stack the box a ton against the Raiders, and that's because they were worried about Henry Ruggs III, who can go over top. Even in all that rain, even in all that wind, they still had to worry about him. If the Browns had Odell out there, the Raiders probably would have had to do the same thing. And the way Baker was playing, I felt like he would have found Odell more often this week than most weeks. So it definitely hurt not having Odell out there just from a running the ball standpoint. I get that Kareem Hunt didn't play terrible, 4.5 yards per carry, but with Odell out there, they averaged 5.6. That just shows you the difference that not having that extra man in the box makes for the Cleveland Browns, and the fact that they have no real scary deep threat is something that they ought to compensate for in the trade deadline. So they got some adjustments to make. They have some improvements to make, but they're 5-3. It's been a little bit shaky how they've got there. I mean, like, they're one drop pass in Cincinnati away from going into this bye week 4-4, which would sound off a lot of panic bells, but you're 5-3. That's the reality. You're 5-3. You have some room to err still. You can make some adjustments, and you can make the playoffs if you do some things correctly. But you got to get healthy, and you got to make those adjustments. But that's my thoughts on this game and the Browns going into the bye week. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.